Your Views, My Facts begins in 3, 2, 1. Welcome everybody to Your Views and My Facts. It's once again Thomas John. I am here with Will and Rich. If you've been watching the news, and hopefully you have, you've been seeing that there has been a lot of disdain and anarchy going on in parts of the United States, specifically Charlottesville, Virginia. So we're going to give our take and our views on what we think has been going on, and hopefully the majority of these will be, I'll say facts, or at least they'll be my facts. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get Will on here to say hello. How you been?
How's everybody? What's going on?
And that's been my bad. I just muted you, man. I'm sorry. So I'm going to correct that mistake. Go ahead.
Gotcha.
I
was muted, but hello, everybody. I'm here now.
Every once in a while, there's errors made. You just got to roll with them. It's organic. Rich?
What's going on, everyone?
Living the dream. Now, I've done this with some of the previous guests, but I don't think I've asked the YouTubes any way that if the fans want to get a hold of you that they can.
No, there's no way to get a hold of me.
Okay.
You can find me actually on Twitter, R_Brown89. You can find me on Facebook under RichB7989, and that's also my Instagram handle as well. So reach out, like some photos. My Instagram's loaded with basically dog pics and pics of my fiance, and then Twitter's basically going to be political stuff and me just saying random shit.
Awesome. And you can find myself at ViewsandFacts on Facebook as well as on Twitter. So hit us up with any comments or questions that you may have. Let's get right into it, and hopefully we won't try to let too much anger be spewed through these mics on this topic. 12 August 2017, so just last Saturday, Charlottesville, Virginia, you had white nationalists, otherwise known as the alt-right or neo-Nazis or the KKK, whatever you would like to state, did a march which was called Unite the Right, and they were marching in protest of the Robert E. Lee statue that was in one of the parks out there, which is known as Emancipation Park. I'll get into that in a little bit soon on why I think that's ironic and funny. But so the Unite the Right wanted to go in and protest that statue being down from the minority communities as well as on the left-hand side, and a large protest ended up happening. An individual was killed, and I'm sure we'll get into some of those facts, but that's kind of the gist of it. So Rich and or Will, do you guys want to kind of give your little synopsis on what happened on that Saturday?
I'd like to ask a question first.
Ask.
So what do you guys think of the term white nationalist?
Can I go?
Yep.
All right, so I obviously have a little bit more public policy, political background than other people on the show as far as guests go, right, that you've had. I think the term nationalist is a very generalized term, right? So I think if you break down white nationalists, we're describing the color of someone's skin and their belief, right? I don't think there's anything wrong with nationalism. I think it is a form of a political party or some sort of affiliation, and you can find nationalists in America and throughout Europe, and I mean as well into Asia. When you say white nationalists, though, it obviously has a really negative sound to it because we do associate Nazism, right? We do associate fascism, and I guess the biggest thing is it is the idea that the white man or woman is better than the other race, and that's sort of the vibe you get when you say white nationalist. Now, not all nationalists are bad. Let's clarify that's very patriotic, and these people just want what's best for their country. In the case of what we saw in Charlottesville, I think you saw legit racism. So they may say that they are nationalists, but really what they are is they are racists.
I would agree with that. I also don't think that there is anything, if you just take the two words as themselves, right, and as a statement, white nationalist, I don't think there's anything wrong with that phrase, but it's when you start attributing it to some other sect or some other unit, right, which is what now the neo-Nazis and the KKK want to use, then it starts bringing on a negative connotation to what it can mean. But just as far as, white nationalist, sort of what Rich was saying, okay, you're just talking about a color, right, and then I mean, essentially, you're for the country that you're in, right? For nationalism, and sure, if you want to drop the word white, I'd be okay with that. But otherwise, to me, it's just saying, patriot.
Yeah, no, I could agree with both of you guys, but what I'm getting at is these people were obviously and openly just racist, and they were calling them white nationalists. We're not calling them what they actually are. We're going to give them a politically correct name for what they're doing.
Well,
you guys don't see a problem with that? You think that's okay and acceptable?
I mean, we can't control the media, right? Like, the media has their voice, so the media is going to choose to roll with whatever platform they want to call them, right? Not to mention, you do have people like protesting and saying that they are nationalists, right? That's the terminology that this group used. So it's just like, you know, it reminds me of like the BLM movement in 2016, how people were saying like, hey, you have your radicals and then you have those that are not so radical with the BLM movement. Is it the same thing or is it not? And so if you assume all white nationalists, if you are a Caucasian and you are a nationalist, if you're assuming everybody's racist, you're generalizing a theme.
That's a fair point. Look, yes, you should be calling out a problem if there's a problem. And I'm sure this is going to be driving towards what the president did or did not say. I'm sure we're going to get to that point a little bit on the labels. But I guess that is my problem, is when you have the labels and we continue to use them, as we are only fostering and continue to flame the fires of hate, racism, segregation. If you just drop it, right? And I mean, if people stopped using them and we didn't call it out, then it's just a person. Because when you boil it all down, it's just hatred, right? I mean, it doesn't have to... It's the same thing as utilizing any other sect of the races and the cultures out there. So yeah, Black Lives Matter, or right, any gangs that you want to throw out there, whatever it may be. It's just people having hatred in their heart. So I don't want to throw out the label, because that's only going to continue to foster it, and that's what they want to hear anyways, right? They want it to be publicized and say it. So essentially, it should just be what like Trump said the first time. Again, we can dive more into it later, but he condemned just the acts, and that's what it should be. Look, it was all bad. It was what it was. That's my 2 cents.
Fair enough. I could agree with all those things. Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question, because that was something that I thought was odd to me when I was looking at it. It's like, we're giving these people this name that's like, okay, it's okay kind of thing.
I think when we're factoring it in, though, hatred does not need a label, right? You don't need to label hatred. You can see it. You know what it is. So in this case, we all saw what we saw, right? It's really no different than some of the rioting in Baltimore, if we're going to be honest. You know, hatred has what it does, and people are going to use any sort of anger, anxiety, etc. to do what they feel like they want to do. So in this case, the white supremacists decided to march. They wanted to light flames,
tiki torches.
Crazy. I mean, right? Same thing with the Baltimore incident, where people were rioting, stealing. It's an excuse for people to do the things that they keep bottled up that they want to do. But I mean, in the end, does it speak on behalf of a whole race of people or ethnicity of people? I don't think it should. We should never generalize anything in that aspect.
But it's like you just said too. You just used the words white supremacist. So why wasn't it labeled white supremacist march or some shit like that?
Because it's easier to pitch the left against the right if you use terms like white nationalists.
Well, right, from the media standpoint, sure, if you want to throw out, again, the white nationalists or the KKK, you can do that. But anybody that has a lick of an education, right, all you have to do is go Google "unite the right" and you know what it means. So it's the exact same thing then as if you're advocating that you would think that they should be changing their name, because then you can go into, well, Black Panthers really isn't that bad. But once you know what they stand for, Black Panthers are bad. I mean, it's the same thing is Black Lives Matter. And right, if we want to get into like the Occupy Wall Street movement and so forth, we can put a fancy little title on it, and then it's going to sound good and flowers and rainbows, but it's still horrible. My biggest issue from the onset of the entire protest on Saturday, or that started Friday night, was they did have the right to do what they wanted to do. So agree or disagree, which is what we're going to get into later, but they still had the permit to go. They can say what they wanted to say, and you just got to live with it. So look, if you're on the opposite side and you want to go partake then and be on the protesting side, then you better be able to live with potentially any of the repercussions that might come of that. And I'm not saying those repercussions are justified, because now we're getting into fighting, shooting, death, right? Which is
violence.
But you go and you're putting yourself in a situation when this also goes, this is what they wanted. They wanted the other side to come out and join them. And by join, I mean to fight them. And so that's what you had. I mean, there's videos out there now. I think one was done by like Vice News. And yeah, you've got the one group saying white lives matter, the other group black lives matter, and they're just going at it. You know that's going to boil over very soon. And sure as shit, the next morning it boiled over.
I think we should obviously advance the conversation into the details now that we're going to talk about.
Okay.
But let me highlight just one item. It's important to understand that the alt-right and the alt-left are clearly a part of the political spectrum, right? There's no denying, like, these are political affiliated hate groups, right? But we're talking, this is like the 2% or 3% of the nation, and everybody else falls within the spectrum without hate, right? You have a huge body of people that are not on an extreme. So I would say for a lot of people that would listen, go outside, talk to your neighbors, talk to the people that you live around, and I think you'll see that it's not as bad as the way the media is portraying America currently, right? You're just seeing the extremes, and it's just fueling a flame that doesn't need to be fueled.
Yeah, if you have a bag of apples, there's going to be some bad ones. That's just how it works.
Right. Okay. I will save my comment on one of the things that you just said because I think it will kind of help wrap up once we get to the termination point of this topic, which might take a while. Let's advance the story a little bit. So 1:45 p.m., right? So James Alex Fields Jr., who was 20 of Ohio, ran his car into some protesters, and he killed an advocate for the disenfranchised. Her name was Heather Heyer, and she was 32 years old. That obviously is one, it started hitting now the national level. The president needs to say something about that. You're getting into the president then makes his comments, right? And again, he condemned everything. That wasn't good enough because he didn't call out anybody by name. So then on Monday, right now, he has a actual teleprompter speech, which he does call them out. I will agree that he should have left it as is from that point on and did not get suckered into it. But the media wants to continue to bite off on this, so they press the questions then on the Tuesday press conference, to which then, me personally, I think Trump did what he does best, which is just go off the cuff. A lot of people don't like it, don't like what he says. They think that he sounds more like a child and incompetent, but I think it's a lot better and it's more genuine. Nobody can read between the lines on exactly what he was saying, and I'm sure somebody's going to sit there and say, well, no, we are reading in between the lines, and what he said was that he supports, right, the KKK and so forth, but there is truth to what he said, that there's the good on the bad, there's the good on the right, and there's the good on the left. There's the bad on the right, and there's the bad on the left. You at least have to acknowledge that, right? And again, then it just came to a head, and it exploded. I don't know. I mean, Rich, where do you want to take this?
I don't agree. I don't agree with the comments being made, and it's funny,
from the president.
Correct. And let me highlight. I am a conservative. I did vote for President Trump. Right. The problem I have with his statements is the initial conversation the day the incident was happening. It seemed like it was a very delayed response. Right. Obviously, he was not at the White House at the time, but it was not a strong enough condemning of obviously the violence, and we were still waiting to see things. So I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt. Things were still unwinding. I'm sure there was a lot that wasn't briefed to him yet at that time.
Right. If I could just inject, and maybe this is part of a question, but on Saturday he was at a conference to honor some VA or some veterans, right?
I think he was at Martha's Vineyard. No,
I could have look. We could fact check that, but I'm almost positive that on Saturday, he was trying to give it had something to do with the VA, right, to where they had done something by passed a new law. And that's what I have a problem with, right, is that, yes, you can condemn it, and yeah, he could have condemned it at a separate issue, or on a separate press conference, but the VA thing should have just been the VA thing.
Yeah, I think he was working with the House bill that had just got signed, right, which is the Forever GI bill. So he may have been doing that. And I'm not saying that what I'm getting at is his response on Saturday, or was it Sunday?
Saturday.
His response on Saturday left enough for me to want him to respond again later. So, like, I'm not opposed to him coming back out on Monday and making a more clear response. And I think that was effective for him to come out and condemn the hate. But with that said, as president, there are some things that you can actually leave to your staff to say. Like, some things don't need to be said by the president, such as there are good people on both sides. No one's naive to that, right? We all know that not everybody is like purely evil, and we understand not everybody's purely good. And the one thing I think President Trump could honestly get better at is there are certain things he should leave for his Secretary of State, Homeland Security, etc. There are certain comments that can be left to being made by them. I also think I'm fine with him putting blame on both sides, right? Because obviously nothing happens in a vacuum. So the alt-right, obviously, the alt-left, both push each other to get to the point that they're at right now. And you can say that, but it's got to be a clear condemnation of the acts of the alt-right at that particular moment. So you're coming out, and instead of saying right or left, instead of saying instead of giving the political spectrum, he should have used it as a unity moment where it should have been like, hey, we're all Americans in the end, right? Like, that would have been a more presidential response. And I get that people want to hear from him off the cuff. I get his voters like that, right? But there's a fine line when you have to be presidential and you're not in campaign mode. And being presidential would have been saying like, hey, there's extremes here, but we're all Americans and we have to stand together against hate.
My issue is the bottom line, though. And we are talking about issues that are 4, 5, 6 levels down from what the main issue is. You first have to acknowledge that you are going to absolutely do no good in the world, right? There is no benefit to removing or leaving the statue there. It means nothing. So I don't even know why anybody's getting upset over it. That's where I get angry, is that just let it be. Who cares?
See, I feel almost the same way about it too, because regardless of what you think the statue might stand for, it's a part of history, whether it's good history or bad history. And everyone should be reminded of where the country has came from, considering our history isn't even that old. And
do your part. Go get an education and teach your children that. So I'd mentioned earlier that the Robert E. Lee statue is in Emancipation Park. Now, it's gone through a couple different name changes. So it used to be known as Lee Park. Now it's Emancipation Park. I don't know what else is there, right, in that area. It is on a Civil War trail that goes through the South. So everybody kept saying it should be in a museum or whatever the case is. Well, I think like those types of trails, right? So I mean, now are you going to have the Trail of Tears? Is that going to start getting obliterated? Because I mean that obviously was bad or whatever. A lot of people died during that expedition. Anywho, look, I don't want to get off topic here, but when you're taking your kids, whoever they may be, and you're going, hey, we're going to go to Emancipation Park. Oh, hey, what's emancipation mean? Because I'm sure the kid does not know. And so then you go, okay, well, let's explain, what exactly that is, right? And that is being able to like set oneself free from whatever it may be. Obviously at the time, slavery, but you can attach it to many different things. So you have that, and then you say, oh, and this person here, right, this Robert E. Lee was a general for the Confederate Army, which was just what the South used, right, as the term. And you need to start going into specifics that we can go back and forth and we can argue on whether he was for or against slavery. But it's also been put into the history books, right, in his biographies and timelines, that he was for states' rights. So he thought the state was more important than the nation, or at the time the Union, than what the northern states ended up being called. So he thought it was more prudent for him to fight for his state, not for the Union. I get then that the states wanted slavery. They wanted a whole bunch of things, but don't just automatically presume that they were all for slavery, because we can go back. We can continue going back throughout history, and slavery was the norm. I'm not saying it was right. That's not what I'm arguing here, but that's what it was at the time. There was a time where whites were slaves. You had blacks selling blacks to whites. You had blacks selling whites to other whites. So slavery is just slavery. I want to take the color away from it. If we're going to have to put on numbers that, well, there were 85% more blacks than there were whites as slaves, so it's a bigger deal to us, I can't have a conversation with you then, because to me that's irrelevant. Because slavery was, again, it's just slavery. Look at the damn definition. I just want people to do a little bit more of the research and say, here's why it's here. Here's why the statue is here. And again, you're removing it for what? Going back to the bigger issue, and this is what people hate to hear on the left, is exactly then what Trump said, which is, well, what's next then? Is it Washington? Is it Jefferson? Because Jefferson, right outside of fucking the Emancipation Park, he's got his mansion, and he's got a rebuilt slave house, which is called Monticello. You're going to bring that down, right? And what I've already been hearing, watching more of the news, is that you have members on the left and within the black community that are arguing that, well, George Washington and Thomas Jefferson did more than good, but yet they were flawed characters, but they still did more good than bad. Well, what prism do you want to look through? Because anybody could argue that Robert E. Lee was doing good.
That's a lot to
I'm
digest.
Sorry. My apologies.
So there's so many portions of that I want to touch on, right? I guess on the later part, right? 12 of our presidents, right, have owned slaves at one time or another, all right? The act is clearly the black mark in American history. It's our blemish, right? But we can say that we did fight our bloodiest and highest casualty war, like as far as for Americans dead, in order to make a more perfect union, right? Which was also the point of us having a constitution in the first place, right?
I'll let you continue, but while it's a blemish on our record, we have a lot of blemishes for the U.S., but we are not the only country that is engaged in slavery, and there are multiple countries that are still engaging in slavery, and I don't see anybody going to those countries and stopping it yet.
Look, not denying any of that, right? What I'm getting at is clearly we had it going until 1860, all right? And at that point, a good chunk of Europe had actually abolished slavery, right? And I'm not saying that we didn't do what we needed to do to make it a better place. And I'm not saying that directly after the war it was simply better. You had Jim Crow later on, segregation in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, etc., 1920s. What I'm getting at is you're right. It's a slippery slope when we're talking about removing statues, right? 12 presidents had them. Actually, if we're gonna be honest, Abraham Lincoln even held slaves until he became president, right? So Honest Abe had slaves. I mean, the presidents that come afterwards, clearly a lot of them were still racist. Are we going to take down all these presidential statues? I think not, right? Like I would say probably not. The biggest issue I have with the statues being there or not being there is the idea that obviously the city or whoever owns the statue should have the right to allow their council members, I think, to remove them or not. Because I guess the question I would pose is, history's written by the winners, correct? The Confederacy lost. They were rebels. I could give a shit less whether these statues are there or not. I'm not from the South. I don't have any relatives that are Southern. And I think even Robert E. Lee, I think in one of his biographies or autobiography, something of that nature, had actually quoted saying that he did not believe the statue should go up. He thought it would make the South take longer in healing. And ideally, nations rebounded better if they did not put monuments and try to remember a fallen Civil War, right? So, I mean, you have Robert E. Lee, who wouldn't even have wanted a statue of himself put up. And I tend to think that at this point, let's not destroy these statues, but I do think they belong in a museum. Back in 2015, when President Trump, then campaign Republican nominee Trump, was talking about the Confederate battle flag over South Carolina, he believed that it should be removed from the state building and put in a museum because he says that's where it belonged. So that was 2015. Nikki Haley, the governor of South Carolina, agreed to that and removed the flag, right? So they at that point, they believed it belonged in a museum. I don't know why it would be any different. I'm not saying we should take down these statues in like Gettysburg, for instance. You know, like places that are actual like monuments, national, state, whatever, and it's made for us to remember the trials that the nation went through. That's fine. Leave those ones up. But if it's simply at a city hall, if it's simply somewhere within the city itself, why not allow the city council, or if they have direct democracy in the city, allow the citizens of the city to vote to have it removed peacefully?
Yeah, and that's the biggest part of it too, is if you guys, or if people don't want the statues up, make sure that they're taken down properly and that they're going to be stored and put on display somewhere else. They don't need to be in warehouses or people destroying them or something like that. It's a valuable part of history, whether it be good or bad.
Yes, if there was one thing that was despicable. And again, it comes down to, I don't know what you were trying to solve, but when the college students or whatever group went down and pulled the one statue down.
Yeah, like that. That's just bizarre.
It was bizarre, but then I'm just watching them like they're going up and they're kicking like this granite damn statue or this bronze statue. Like, what are you doing? Like, you just look foolish. I mean, you're kicking an inanimate object and nobody cares, right? But they feel like they won. They feel like they stuck it to the man. I can give and take with you, Rich, and sure, put it in a museum, right? Put it somewhere that it is more on the history aspect. So, I mean, for me, I think if it's part of City Hall or whatever the case is, I think City Hall is also, in theory, kind of where you go for a place of learning as well, or it could be used as that. So I don't know what, I don't think there'd be anything wrong with having that there. Or again, I mean, it's still just having the information there on why it's there, right? So a plaque or fine, put something up on the other side then, right? Of, well, here's who helped end slavery or free slavery. Like, here was the bad side, here was the good side. You can't forget the bad; it's just going to come back, which is just like history. If those who forget the past are condemned to repeat it.
If I can touch as well on the idea that this was simply about states' rights, I think it's important to remember that though it is about states' rights, you can't pick and choose when federalism or dual federalism works, right? If you believe in states' rights, it needs to be across the board. You need to believe that the state should have the right to control their sovereignty in that aspect, excluding anything that's federal, right? And the problem I have with the argument from many Southerners, and I work with Southerners all the time, right, is they use states' rights to try to justify the Confederacy. But the truth is, prior to the war, the South actually complained that the northern states had more rights than them, right? And they did not like the way that a lot of the northeastern states decided to legislate. They did not allow a lot of the trade from the South into a lot of the northern states without it being taxed, without different things. And if we're talking states' rights, you can't complain or bitch about one state having rights and you saying that they're stepping on your rights. If you're complaining that they have too many rights, don't tell us that you need more rights.
Oh, I agree with that. Now, side question. If you were against the Confederacy, right, so you're a minority. I mean, I am. I'm a Latino. I wasn't saying you. I meant in general, right? Like just being in the minority, right? So you obviously do not like what the Confederacy stood for, which were 11 states in the South: Texas, Florida, South Carolina, Alabama. I
mean, obviously, I'm using a modern lens, but no, I do not support slavery.
I'm not saying you. I'm saying the minorities in general, right? Those that want it down. Because those states were part of the Confederacy, why do any minorities live down in the South then? Like, why wouldn't you want to then further yourself, or distance yourself as far away as possible from the South?
There's a lot of reasons they live in the South, actually.
Oh, I understand. I'm just saying it's the convenience factor, and they want to pick and choose what they want to start bitching about.
I don't know if I'd say that, right? So naturally, human beings normally, and granted it's changing with globalization, education, and the more we advance as a nation, right? But human beings normally don't move far from where they're from. In the case of the African Americans, or what I'll say is I like to use the term black to describe somebody that is born here in America, right? They're not, their ethnicity may be from Africa, but they are probably first, second, third, fourth, not first, but second, third, fourth generation, black.
Oh, I agree with that. If you're going to put a label on you're an American first.
Correct, absolutely. So for them, as soon as the war disbanded, they didn't have any opportunities still. Even with the Emancipation Proclamation, there were no jobs for them, Like, nobody in the North was looking to just hire Negroes. Like, that's not the process. So you need money to move north, right? You also have the fact that directly after the war, you have a radical Republican Congress trying to put the United States back together. And what they did is they actually empowered a lot of the blacks to be the law enforcement, be a part of like the Union Army that would occupy that particular area, and it actually led to a lot of conflict in these southern states between the whites that felt then oppressed because they were upset that they lost, and the blacks that were actually there defending those that were still in those states. And so naturally, because of the mass amount of people that were there for slavery, they're not going to move that far from it.
No, I agree with that. I was I guess trying to make somewhat of a little bit of a joke there.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Why would you want to stick around yeah, I got you.
But it is what it is. Now, Al Sharpton recently said, like 2 days ago, he went on record as saying, right, so he was asked, well, what would you think about Trump's comments of going down to the Jefferson Memorial, right, in Washington and so forth? And Al Sharpton's response, and you can look it up because it's out there, was, well, if you're asking right where my money needs to go to fund a public national park or a public monument, he said, I don't feel that I should have to continue paying for a monument that is an insult to my ethnicity, race, and culture. So people want to say Trump's crazy, but this is the road it's going to go down. Which, so when does it stop? And he asked a valid question. And thank you, Al Sharpton. You validated his question because that's what I want. When does it stop? And what I will agree with Al Sharpton on is I'm happy now that you want to say, where is my money going to go? Because I've asked, we on the right have been asking the same question. We want to be able to judge where our money goes.
Agreed. I mean, Al Sharpton is a scumbag. Let's be honest here about Al Sharpton. He's a scumbag, right?
He's a piece of shit.
And he's also the last person that should be talking about money.
I don't even know why anybody follows him or looks up to him.
So Al Sharpton, I believe, owes roughly around like 8 or 9 years worth of taxes. So his money's not going to fund anything because he fucking owes money, right? But excluding that piece, this is the same bastard that used to hang out with Donald Trump prior to like 2010. So he can say whatever he wants, but like none of these people are real. This isn't real life. Like what you see on TV is all make believe. And if you think Al Sharpton's here for the black man, you're an idiot.
I agree. Will? Looks like you got a lot of things processing in the brain.
Well, I'm just thinking about what you guys are saying for right now. I don't really have a comment or anything to make like that. But I will agree that it does seem like a movie when you're watching these news channels and shit like that. It's very misleading. It's very misleading.
I fully agree that it does seem like a movie. Now, yesterday, so Thursday, the attacks in Spain, and I just want to touch on this shortly because I think this can tie in everything, is we in the U.S. and our population and the citizens, again, minority or not, this goes back to, we're so worried about the bullshit. And I want to know what you would be worried about if you ended up having bombs going off in the street, constantly, right? I mean, us being attacked more frequently than what we are. Like, is that what you'd be worried about? Is a fucking statue?
Yeah, we have these like minor problems, is what you're getting at, right? These are small issues that aren't really
on the world
on like world
level,
scale. These are like
yes.
very small issues, but that's the American media, because what does the American media show everyone? We show everyone America. Like if you've ever been to another country or spent an ample amount of time in another country, you'll notice that it's not solely focused on their country and what's going on. It's very based on like the world and what's happening in the world. Not, I live in, for example, South Korea, so everything's about South Korea. Like, no, there's a lot going on in the world, and that's what the news is covering. Where in America, it's like, we're Americans, so let's just talk about American problems, American news, and, these people got bombed in Barcelona or whatever.
Right.
All right, back to America.
I agree. It's going to, I'm worried that it's going to hit a point to where we will start becoming attacked more frequently, and I don't want it to be too late. Right? I don't want to try to like over exaggerate that, but people need to start worrying about the things that are going to matter, right? And worry about the bigger picture.
But I think in America, we've been given the individual rights to worry about what we want, right? That's one of the beauties of being in America, right?
True.
Are we going to sacrifice freedoms to speak for safety? No, and we're not talking that right now, right? What we're talking about is trying to weigh in on what is important, what is not important. Unfortunately, you have a very domestic policy that is not sound currently, right? There's not really a domestic policy in place at the federal level, and you have a left political spectrum that's finding any way they can to attack the current administration. And you're seeing that spill over into the cities, into these major regions, and then obviously the media is highlighting anything they can that shows a dysfunctional America. Because what is a better sale in 2020 than a more dysfunctional America, right? The Democrats aren't putting anybody up of any significance for the 2020 election, from what I know. So the best chance they have is to make Trump look as dysfunctional as possible, which isn't hard currently with the current administration. But that's their only sale for 2020 right now.
I agree with that. I just think that it's going to take some sort of another major attack, right? So now trying to equate it to either September 11th or World War II, right? The attack on Pearl Harbor, to where it's going to be able to bring more unity around. Look, again, and this is not me saying that these aren't big issues internal to the U.S., but you can try to bring people to the table and resolve them a lot more peacefully than what's being done. Everybody always has, right, going back to the individual rights that you were mentioning, everybody has a hidden agenda, and everybody wants to be, self-sufficient, and they want to be the leader, or right, be the man, be the king. The fact that you had this unite the right going around, right, and claiming their or stating their phrase of, right, Jews will not replace us, or they will not replace us, whatever the case is, they're not going to care. I mean, let's just put this in perspective. If they were able to get rid of all the minorities and everybody that they hated, they're still going to have problems, because they're all going to then be fighting within each other or amongst each other, right, for who's going to be the top dog. Until you're number one, you will always have a problem, right? You're always trying to advance something for yourself. And I guess where I'm going with that is this goes back to, just don't give them the platform. If you're not hurting me and you're not making a threat against my life or my family, whatever, go do what you're going to do. You want to go protest, right? And we'll protest the next week legally, right, and constitutionally. But make a sound argument for what you're trying to do, because when you don't do that, then TJ has to go into his research mode and start figuring out where you start becoming a hypocrite. So I wish I had my book with me, but I'm pretty sure I've got it memorized in my head. I read a book called The Secret History of the FBI, written by a author that's well known. Or at least a respected like research journalist. The FBI back in the 1960s ended up wiretapping and bugging Martin Luther King Jr. And I know I'm probably going to strike a nerve with a lot of people, but it's got to be said. He initially was wiretapped because they thought that he was on a communist, right, socialist, and who he was hanging out with. Well, JFK was in office then, and it stopped a majority of the wiretaps, but Hoover, being the man that he was and did not care, he thought the FBI was the being and should be the entity. He continued wiretapping Martin Luther King Jr. So in one of his hotel rooms, this is Martin Luther King Jr., mind you, he was having an orgy with multiple white women. This is on transcript, right? Like, this ain't me making this shit up. So you can either believe history or not. But if you don't want to believe this, then don't tell me that Lee was for slavery, because you weren't there. That's history. I guess that's fake too. So anywho, he was having an orgy with multiple white women, and then the white women were on, right, the microphone saying, "You shouldn't be doing this. You are a preacher." To which then King responded, "Tonight I am just a N-word." And then he went on to say, "Lick me down there." So I guess this guy's full of fucking bullshit. So the 25 plus monuments that we have around the country and the 100 plus schools that are named after him, guess we got to get rid of those. That offends me. You were a hypocrite.
Yeah, what's fucked up about that, and I wanted to make this point a little bit earlier, it's like, in this day and age, when people get offended, it's almost like you're entitled to something now. Oh, I'm offended, so I'm entitled to this, which is bullshit. If you're offended, suck it the fuck up and move on, and,
absolutely
take it. And see, that's the problem here, is like, that's a crazy ass story about Martin Luther King, though. I've never heard that before. That was very interesting.
I've read into that as well, and I've
very
heard
interesting.
That.
So yeah, and I agree with you. Being offended is not the same as oppression, right? And that's where people start mixing the two.
And yeah, those things need to be different or split from each other. Those things can't be used in cohesion together, because they're not.
Let me caveat my statement earlier. As I said, I did not give a shit what happened to these statues, because I have no relatives of the South, right? But I do not want these fucking things taken down if you're offended. You can take them down if they're voted upon, right? If we think it's better for unity, that's fine. But if you're fucking offended, I hope they leave the statues up.
Right. Well, and again, play by the rules and play by what the law states. So, yes, if you want them, I don't like you saying taking down, right? But if you want them removed, then move them rightfully so, right? And move them peacefully, or again, so they can actually go into a museum or go wherever they need to go. So if the Confederate Daughters, or I don't know what those organizations are called, right? But there's like Daughters of the South or Confederate. Look, if no museum, I guess is what I'm saying, wants it, right, then you at least should be giving it back to them than saying, hey, you guys want to go build up your own money with a museum with private funds? Here are the statues. Let it be what it's going to be. But likewise, again, the flip side of that is I want to be careful with how I say this, but I don't necessarily want then a monument going up in regards to like the freedoms of slavery, and that you don't explain how you got to that point then, right? Does that make sense? You know, like I don't want it being glorified of, well, we won and that's it. It's, well, explain how you got to that point. It goes back to preserving the history. Am I making any sense to either one of you, I guess, in what I was trying to...
Kind of confused me a little bit.
I'm sorry.
I think I get what you're saying. You're saying, like, we have to explain the story. You don't skip to the end of the story.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
So put a plaque in place of the statue stating the story, the amount of lives lost, and how long people suffered until they were emancipated, right?
Right, yeah, and don't name names if you don't want to name names. That's what I'm saying. You can just say, hey, the Confederacy, boom, that's it.
But what I'm getting at is, I don't want to see them removed if we're simply just giving in to social justice, right?
I agree.
Like, because in that case, MLK should just be ripped down for anti-LGBT, right? Or if we're going to go from that same category, any statue of Bill Clinton should be removed because he was allegedly a rapist. Or Harry Truman, Woodrow Wilson, any statue of them should be removed because they were racist. LBJ clearly hated black people. Let's take his statue down as well then, right? I'm not going to give in to the, hey, I'm offended crew, because it never stops with them. They will find something new to be offended about.
Right, and that's where I'm at with this whole story. Was it despicable, right, on what they were saying? The Unite the Right. Yes, it was, right? So again, right, I'll throw out the names there so I can appease Will, who's probably looking at me. So white supremacists, neo-Nazis, KKK, right? If you're any type of segregation that wants to oppress some other minority, race, religion, right, group of people, right, yeah, it's despicable. That being said, though, they still had the right to protest. They had the right to say what they wanted to say, and they should have just let them go out and express that right without making it become more volatile, which is what happened. Because then I could easily be on the side of, if you did not make it so explosive that now you... All right, do you think this Fields guy, I guess, would have drove his car right through he drove it through protesters, which means that they were protesting against them. He wasn't going to drive that through his own group of people. So that's all I'm saying. Just let them say what they want to say.
Yeah, but you're saying just protest peacefully. That's what you're getting at. Follow the law, and you can do what you want to do, kind of thing.
Right, and unfortunately, hate speech is covered under that. But that's my point. But just let it be.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the thing is, like, at the end of the day, these people are just throwing around words. That's literally what it comes down to. It's just words.
Exactly, and that's the point with what Rich was stating was, of course, right. You can find something about anybody and everybody to be offended about, or any topic or any subject, and then you will also gravitate towards what you thought was good about somebody. But again, just dig a little bit. Everybody's got skeletons. Everybody has secrets. You will find it. So yeah, don't get too caught up in the meaningless bullshit that's in between, right? Just the bottom line was that shit's bad, or shit was bad. That was our history. We shouldn't forget it. Let's move along. And don't come after me because you think I owe you something. But I don't owe you shit. I had no part in this.
I do think the line between protest and a hateful or violent intent was slightly crossed, though, by the alt-right in this particular scenario, because there were reports of people having not only torches, but some of them having rifles standing outside of a Jewish church. So that's where I think a peaceful protest, or maybe even a hateful protest, changes to a darker intent, right? And that is not protected.
Oh.
You cannot stand in front of a church armed with torches and rifles and not expect the police to come and make arrest. that should be condemned.
That's not a peaceful protest.
Correct.
Whether you have any intention on using your weapon or whatever, it's not peaceful.
All right, I have a hard time agreeing with both of you there because just to paint the picture, they were tiki torches, number one.
But
right?
you know, hold on. The torch is representing what, though? The same shit that KKK white supremacist people would do, correct?
Yeah, they're a little. It's a cheap way of basically wrapping.
That's what it signifies, though, correct? I mean, you could say it's just a fucking tiki torch, man. You could say that, but like that's what it signifies.
I don't.
Whether those people are KKK people or not, you're marching around with a fucking torch like that.
Well,
you know what you're trying to do.
Before the flashlight, what was there?
There was a torch.
I mean, how many flashlights were there back when the KKK was at its peak? I'm just asking a question. And look, again, you can also do when the KKK was at its peak, there were next to no lynchings. Also, by the way, but that's besides the point. Sure, if you want me to stretch to that yes, the torch itself, right, was trying to be a symbolism of burning crosses, right, and going through, right, anarchy, the fire, the flames. Sure, I can make that leap, and it's easy for me to make that leap. But to me, it was more of the ambiance of torches. If you're marching at night, torches look better than flashlights. I don't care what the cause is. I guess that's where I'm at. Like, torches just look better.
So you're saying people are just drawing the line because it's what their views are and stand for, and they're just like, torch looks better because I want to protest.
I'm not saying that's what they did.
Okay.
And again, they within that march can have their own views on what they want, why they wanted to carry the torch. I'm just saying I didn't really look at it one way or the other because it was just fuck it, right? It's just a torch. And look, if they really wanted to be anarchist, and see, I guess the other part that just makes me laugh is they were tiki torches. Like, oh, how badass are you? You've got a fucking tiki torch. Where's your damn giant wooden, like club with the cloth wrapped around it, soaked in kerosene, lit? Like that at least would have been like, why didn't they have that? Because they're pussies.
Yeah, it's a bunch of
right?
little college
And they're like,
kids.
I'm gonna hold my little tiki torch because that's my point. That's why. Who cares? Look at the fun from that aspect. What I guess that's where I make fun of them. Like,
no, yeah, you can
okay.
definitely see humor in the situation. It's not hard to see. Yeah, I mean, you have a bunch of college kids on Friday night marching around with tiki torches. Yeah. If you want to pull that out and give that to a comedian, that's a pretty fucking funny bit. If you want to spin that.
Yeah. So, now if I can go a little bit further though with the question, which was on why I think it's hard for me to say that it was violent, is are they not allowed to have weapons?
I'm not sure what the rules and regulations are for the area. You know what I'm saying?
I don't know either.
It could be possible that you're allowed to open carry a weapon like that, right? It's not
sure,
too far-fetched.
Right. So I think what you have to give some acknowledgement to is that, yes, all right, you had one lone dude that used a car and killed a person and injured 13, 15, 20 people more.
Something like that.
So I got it. That's horrible and it's bad. And again, I feel for the family of again, Heather Heyer, who was the one that died. But if there were all these weapons,
it should be mass casualty, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying, because the majority of those people that got injured was from the car, right? Of him speeding
the other
through.
People were from, what was it, just being trampled and fucking stepped over. We don't really know. There's no like, this person was injured because of this.
Right, but where were the shootings?
But yeah,
where were the
no
stabbings?
one was shot or stabbed. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
I think it was a peaceful. It's sitting there with like an unstable compound, right? Like in science. I wish Cody was here so he gave us our little like science minute. But yeah, you're there with an unstable compound, and if you disturb it, okay, it's going to become explosive. But otherwise, just let it be what it's going to be, and let them. And again, why are you going out? Why are you on the opposition going out to stop it? It's not like they were, in City Hall, all speaking up and about not passing a certain bill, and then they were keeping the people that were for the bill right from coming in. They were just out there to surround us. How long you think they were going to stay there? Just wait it out. Again, this is what I'm saying. The calls meant nothing. We don't want it to come down. We don't want it to come down. Well, your tiki torch is going to run out of fuel. Then you're going to go home. And then just let them come back in with a little bulldozer or the crane, move the statue. It's over. Like, it takes two sides to tango. Maybe that's my final point.
But yeah, no, I get what you're saying. Like, these people want to be enabled, right? That's what you're getting at?
Yes, both sides.
Yeah, oh, of course. And I think that was, I mean, we had said something to the light of that earlier, like, these people may have had the motive of doing this to get a reaction out of the other people, to cause this. Did it spiral out of control? Obviously. I mean, what did you think was going to happen? What did you think was going to happen? Do you really think that, like, these people are doing this with the sole objective of provoking another group of people, and then they're just going to peacefully talk it out? I feel like, I don't know, like, I feel like that's pretty far-fetched. Like, you're going to get a mob of people that are going to provoke another mob of people, and then you guys are going to sit down and talk about what's going to happen and peacefully protest each other. That's not going to fucking happen. Not with a mob full of people. That's not how being in a mob works. Because one person says one shit that gets out of control, and everyone's like, ah, and loses their fucking shit, and then it's... Well, we know that's how it works. We know that's how it works.
Yeah. The other part that I find this amusing, or I think that it's telling, but you want the left side of the media, wants you to think that the president is for neo-Nazis, the KKK, and white supremacists and so forth,
which is bizarre.
It is bizarre, and nobody has sat there and answered the question of, well, what do you think that he thinks of his daughter Ivanka, then, who is dating a Jew? I'm sorry, married. I guess he's married to the, so do you honestly, do you think he would have let that happen years ago? I don't think so. But the media wants to, twist it into some other storyline. And all they could come up with last night when I was watching the news was, well, silence speaks volumes, because they were asking why Ivanka and then her, I think it's Jared Kushner, have not come out and condemned it. And I go back to, they shouldn't. They should just remain silent on it.
And that's the thing. It's you can't win that battle. You can't win that battle because you say something. And then it's like, oh, he said this. Look at this shit. He's a racist. Oh, he didn't say anything. He doesn't give a fuck about this subject.
Right.
You can't win that battle. And that's see, there's this thing that goes on nowadays, too, where it's like people want to, I don't know if they want to attack other people, but there's some type of like stimulation in the brain of someone like attacking another person or calling someone out on something over the internet or over social media, or there's some source like that. It's like people want to try to come after people for whatever reason. Like, I don't know what started that or where that's come from, but that's what you watch on the news too, is like these people, they literally just, I mean, dude, go home, watch the news tonight, put on Fox News, and then just flip in between that and CNN or some shit. You're gonna get the fucking both ends of the spectrum, like, and you're like, what the fuck is going on here? There's no middle ground there. There's no middle ground.
I agree. You have to try to assemble what the middle ground is from both of those. We've hinted about social media before, right, on some other episodes and shows, but I do think that how much that the easy access to the internet and being able to publicize something is only a catalyst for all this BS. I'm not saying it wasn't there before. It was, and right, the internet social media has done a lot of good things, but there's, again, this goes back to there's pros and cons. So there's got to be the yin and the yang. It also does bad things because it only helps to highlight what has been going on. But yeah, it is a mind trip to go between the two major networks.
I was going to say, let's not go off on the social media tangent or anything like that.
I wasn't trying to.
But
I'm sorry.
No, I agree. And just back to the point of, you can't win that battle. You can't win that battle, especially when, just look at how everything has been playing out since the election. Like, has there been any good things said about President Trump that you can recollect? Like, I feel like there's just so many bad headlines of people just throwing dirt on his name and shit like this that it's hard to like find the one good thing that people think that he does or that he does do. Like, if he does do something good, for every one good thing that he's done, there's 10 different things saying, oh, fucking this dude's done this. Look at this bullshit. He hates this, blah, blah, blah. Like,
a majority of that, I think, has to come down to who he is and that he won. Because if it would have been like Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, if they would have won, yeah, the left would not have obviously like that, right? Because obviously both sides are trying to win here.
Yeah.
But they would not be going down these roads of, well, let's see if we could find out why he shouldn't have won, right, or what the problem is. But because it was such a devastating blow, because you're talking somebody that had nothing to do with politics, a celebrity,
he's a fucking celebrity,
billionaire, and he came in and or maybe just millionaire. Is he a billionaire? I think just millionaire.
No, he's a billionaire.
Oh, billionaire. Okay. So yeah, he came in and he demolished Hillary Clinton. Look, regardless of what you want to think of, right? I mean, those are at least are the facts that non-political, a lot of money, demolished her. They do not like that. They are upset. And of course, rightfully so. I guess if it was on my side, yeah, I'd be upset too. But I'm not going to go grasping at straws. So how long do you? I guess this kind of ties into to what we're talking about. But how long do you let something foster, and do you continue to pull at it? So they keep wanting to go down, right? Russia. This is not that podcast. Slavery ended a while ago. Again, I get it was a bad mark on our record, but just let it go. You're always going to have a bad apple.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, saying let it go is...
It's tough. It's hard.
No, yeah, it's definitely tough. And
difficult thing you
can't
can do.
speak for someone that's actually, been a slave or something like that, or even has, like, ethnic ties to things like that. So I don't really know what it's like. I'm not going to really touch on that. But, I mean, the past is the past, and you have to learn from it. That's just the biggest thing about it. You have to learn from it. Whether it's good or bad, you have to learn.
Yeah.
And you can't get upset. Like, you can get upset about it, but you're not going to do anything for yourself by getting upset.
Exactly. Forgive your neighbor, but again, that's harder to easier said than done.
Oh, of course.
All right. So, yeah, I would say I'm not sure if there's much more that we can add on this subject. Then I will let one of you two kind of give out your closing thoughts.
I think the big thing we need to look at here, just as a closing thought, I guess, is the idea of nationalism, right? It's what we think is driving people to act crazy on the alt-right. But to be honest with you, I think as all Americans, we should definitely have a sense of nationalism. I think in today's society, we look and we say, okay, we try to describe ourselves culturally, ethnic-wise, like where our skin color's from or who came before us. But I think it's important to remember that individuals of all colors trailblazed for this nation. It's important to remember that Civil War and even after World War I, World War II, and obviously post, African Americans, blacks have been a part of America. They have been Americans. And I think whether you're Asian, whether you're Mexican, whether you're white, whether you're black, if we start looking at ourselves as Americans and we try to see what we have in common, I think you'll find that we have 80% more in common than we do not, right? We have a basic understanding that we want our freedom to be able to do what we want to do for a living, to provide for our families, and to die the way we want to. And I think if we continue to go down the current path that we are, we will be that nation divided that will not stand, quoting President Lincoln. But if we unite, we can do great things, Through unity, we got to the moon. Through unity, we beat the Nazis, and we won the Cold War. And that same unity is needed today, the unity that we had during 9/11, how we were able to come together. So I just hope that even at our darkest hour domestically, we can still look abroad and say that we are still one nation and we need to strive to be better.
Rich has my vote for 2020, for sure.
It's got to be 2024. I'll be old enough then.
But yeah, I think just to take away from the podcast and stuff, there's no room in the world for hate and shit like this when it goes on. I think that's pretty much the biggest point here. And we're in the age of information, so do your research when you're looking into things like this. Don't just be, grasped by a headline or clickbait or some shit like that. Do your research, look into things, and be objective when you approach situations.
I agree with those 2 points. My final thoughts, there is no place for hatred, while at the same time, though, when you have some sort of a setback, we should be able to move forward from that, right, or learn from it. So without having troubles, you won't go forward. Even hopefully a misstep, right, you're still moving forward. We all agree that the far right or the far left sects of the SECTS, sex, of the population are bad, right? Like nobody here is advocating for hate or hate groups or racism. What I'd mentioned earlier is, do the research, find out what the actual bottom line is, find out what you're truly mad about. I mean, if you're actually mad about just the fact that he didn't say a specific term, I think you need to look, look inward in your own life and figure, you got some things to work out, because there's a bigger issue there than he did not specifically condemn the KKK. I don't think that's needed. It's getting down to what is the bigger picture. Like, all right, fine. You don't think that the statue should be publicly funded or whatever the case is, then all right, we will get it moved, to a museum or through some other avenue, but do it peacefully. Advocate, yes, your right to protest, to assemble, but abide by the laws and, let the legislation that is out there move what you want your agenda to be forward. Because if you don't go that route, then you will get the opposing side that will want to meet you in the middle with violence. That was our little discussion about the Charlottesville incident that has occurred back on the 12th of August of 2017. And we again hope that you do your own research. If you watch one news channel or the other, take the opportunity to flip to the other side so you can hear both sides of the story and figure out where the truth lies in the middle. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions for the show, find us on Twitter at ViewsandFacts. You can find us on Facebook at ViewsandFacts, and we will look forward to hearing from you.